Good morning, everyone. This is Simona Cristiano from CREA, which is the National Council of Research in Agricultural Economics and Politics in Italy, based in Italy. And there are some colleagues of mine here who participated to this work. This is Patrizia Proietti from CREA as well, Valentina Carta, and then also we have Francesca Varia. Today we will talk about this assessing framework that we developed within the framework of two European projects. One is an Erasmus Plus project, Ramona SPL, Precision Learning Project, and the other one is I2Connect project, which aims at boosting the capabilities of advisory services in serving the farmers and serving and support innovation processes within the agricultural knowledge and innovation systems. Today we are presenting the methodology we used in defining a framework for the assessment of the performances of the advisory services within the context of the common agricultural policy in Europe. This was a people-centered framework, co-building of this assessment framework, because it was participated and based on the expectations and on the needs of the advisory services, farmers and policymakers. Have been developed, co-developed together with these, which we call potential end users of this assessment tool. Now, to start, we will contextualize this framework, this tool for the assessment of the performances of the advisory services, basically through defining the political context of this framework, and then going down to what is meant by assessing the performances of the advisory services and what is the assessment tool about. So I would introduce my colleague Patrizia Proietti to talk about the common agricultural policy and how the advisory services are positioned in the context of the new common agricultural policy. Patrizia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Simona. Thank you, Simona. Can you go with presentation mode? Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. Well, the premises, as Simona said, the premises for this research has to be found in the new CAP 2023-2027, which provides a new framework for creating a regional or national innovation ecosystem. What is meaning by that? The new CAP is trying to improve, to strengthen the national EKIS, but also at the local level, through improving knowledge flows and strengthening links between research and practice, strengthening the role of agricultural advisory services and their integration within the EKIS, and the improvement of interactive innovation processes. Well, because all the CAP provides that the achievement of all the 9 objectives of the CAP should be supported by this national, this innovation ecosystem, by a transversal objective that is the modernization, which include the strategic approach to the EKIS. Particularly, the role of the advisors is particularly relevant. since the improvement of knowledge, since they are seen as the key actors in improving knowledge flows and being connected, trying to build a bridge between research and practice. Particularly articles 15 and 78 of the new regulation 2115 provide that advice should support farmers and forestry and other CAP beneficiaries and this advice support should be included in the CAP strategic plan. And also, the new regulation provides that all advisors must be integrated within the EKIS in an inclusive way. And they should be able to cover the economic, environmental, and social dimension and provide up-to-date technological and scientific information developed by research and innovation. And furthermore, these advisors should be as impartial as possible. Thank you, Simona. What this imply? What imply the integration of the advisors within the EKIS? Several challenges can be identified. First, we need strategies, policy mechanisms and instruments to promote and support the effective enhancement and integration of the advisors. And then we need new instruments and approaches to assess their integration within the EKIS. How do they work? Are they effectively integrated? Is their job effective within the EKIS? And furthermore, we have to deal with the advisor perception about the need and opportunity to get integrated within the EKIS. Are there knowledge about their role within the EKIS? So we thought that there was the need among the others to create some tools to assess professional performances in order to assess the effectiveness of advice within the EKIS. And within this framework, among the others, as I said, we thought to a professional performance assessment tool. And why an assessment tool? We tried to build this tool with the support of advisors and try to let them aware that an assessment tool is not to judge, is not the purpose of an assessment tool is not to judge and so to evaluate really the job, but to have a tool to reflect and improve the performances, to improve competencies and performances. So this assessment tool has the goal not to judge, but to help advisors in deepening their personal growth and professional development. So this professional performance assessment tool is needed in our vision to engage the user in reflection and observation to inform what he or she does and fueling awareness about the capacity to create something new. So this is the context of this tool.
Now I would like to introduce one of the, I mean, just to focus more on how the common agricultural policy and this new positioning, a better positioning of the advisory services is somehow felt by the same advisory services. I would like to introduce Lina Pecora, who is a representative of CONAF, the National Council of the advisory service, professional advisory services in Italy, and she worked together with us, and I will tell you better later on when describing the methodology by which we developed this assessment tool. Lina Pecora will introduce, will talk about how the advisors are feeling about this new positioning within the CAP, the importance of this CAP somehow. So I would like to have from her this perspective by answering some questions. So Valentina, can you introduce Lina and go ahead with the questions to Lina, please?
Yeah, we can send the video.
Good morning to everybody. I'm Alberto Sturla, a researcher at the Department of Policies and Bioeconomy at the National Council for Agricultural Research and Economics. Today we have the pleasure of having with us Mrs. Carmela Pecora, agronomist, head of the Department for Innovation and Professional Advancement of the Italian National Council of Agronomists and Foresters. We will be discussing with her the role of performance assessment tools in the context of the new CAP and public policies. First of all, we would like to explore with you, Carmela, how evaluation tools could support advisors in meeting the challenges of a greater integration with all the acts actors. This is strongly encouraged by the new CAP regulation. Will evaluation be up to the job?
National ACEs are becoming more and more complex. Such a complexity requires a whole new set of competencies and skills, for example, skills related to innovation adoption and spreading, networking skills, use of appropriate tools for delivering and consultancy. An appropriate instrument to evaluate to what extent an advisor already own these competencies and how much they meet farmers' need. For a long time, advisors have been not really involved in rural development policies, and this somehow created a gap in competencies addressing certain CAP topics and requirements. With the forthcoming CAP 2023-2027, we have the opportunity to gain space for both increasing our capacities through vocational training and to offer quality service under public contribution. On this regard, the implementation of practical tools that help advisor assessing need for improvement in knowledge and overall capacities to provide due to CAP-oriented and quality service is crucial. It is crucial for advisors to be engaged in co-development processes with policy makers and farmers that allow common understanding and goals of performance evaluation and timely implementation of such tools. The experience of co-working with CREA has been very interesting, and we mutually gained in increased competencies and respective activities more than we had planned. During the process, new ideas of collaboration came out. I believe that the common agriculture policy programming might be a common ground of capacity building for a variety of ACES actors and thus a major participation of advisors.
Thank you, Carmela. National CAP strategic plans should provide information on how advisors, researchers, and the national CAP networks will work together. How does evaluation fit in this new framework?
The experience of co-working with CREA has been very interesting, and we mutually gained in increased competencies and respective activities more than we had planned. During the process, new ideas of collaboration came out. I believe that the common agriculture policy programming meet be a common ground of capacity building for a variety of ECIS actors and thus a major participation of advisors within the CAP is very welcome. In particular, I would then suggest that under the CAP forms of farmers-oriented partnerships between advisor and researcher would had promoted and financed in order to better help them tackling with global and local challenges. Need of specific indicator measuring the strength of relationship, for example, related to participation in GO operational groups or other cooperation initiatives, possibly relating it to result in an holistic way. Evaluation should also be put at the service of all ECIS actors, as advisors are not the only ones who need updating and new skills. In view of greater integration among actors, evaluation could be useful in detecting gray areas that hinder collaboration, specific transversal needs, etc., so that common knowledge gaps could be detected and joint training activities with researchers, trainers, and digital experts to promote system skills could be promoted.
CONAF and CREA are building together a comprehensive assessment tools for advisors' performances. How CONAF will be using such a tool?
CONAF is the National Council of Italian Agronomists and Foresters. Is the most important agricultural professional association in Italy, and it counts more than 20,000 agronomists and foresters. We intend to promote the use of this tool among our associated and through vocational training help the advisors put in practice the tools and follow up on the results of the assessment by more precise curricula development and continuous up-to-date.
Thank you, Carmela, for these useful insights, and thank you to all of you for having joined the webinar.
Thank you. Here we are. Thank you very much, Francesco. Thanks for sharing this video, which was registered by Lina Pecora. I repeat this, Lina Pecora, representative of CONAF, the National Assembly of Professional Order of Advisory Services, of the Farm Advisory Services in Italy. And there was also my colleague Alberto Stulla, who was interviewing Lina Pecora. We registered this video also for problems about on the timings, due to timing restrictions. So we can go ahead now on the presentation with of the framework and how we developed this framework. I hope you can see my screen now, and I go into the presentation mode. Here we are. Okay. So the objectives of this assessment framework. Well, the main objective was defining a practicable framework and tool and some other tools to allow farm advisory services assessing their own performances and quality of services, and also continue by updating the results of this assessment through engaging in precision learning pathways. What does it mean? It means that the aim was there to be very precise in defining the lack of competencies associated to performances, to low quality performances, in view of engaging in these advisory services in precision learning pathways. And this was especially, particularly one of the aims of Ramone's PL project, Ramone's Precision Learning Project. We had some issues to tackle with in defining this practicable framework. First of all, this because of the complexity, of the environment in which advisory services are played nowadays in farming systems and agricultural knowledge and innovation systems. So the first is that this framework should have been context sensitive somehow, meaning that it should have been based on actual needs for advisory services by farmers and other potential users of advisory services within the ACIS. Should reflect and addressing also the diversity of farming systems across Europe. This tool was, this framework was built up around under the CAP, under the Common Agricultural Policy within the European policies. And so farming systems here, we are talking about farming systems across Europe, which are quite different one to each other, in the member states. This framework should have been relevant and also coherent with the policy context, with the objectives of the CAP, European Common Agricultural Policy. On the other side, the side of the perspective of the users of this framework was that this framework should have been significant for potential users. And who are the potential users? The potential users are, first of all, the advisors, because they have to engage practitioners frameworks to assess their own performances, quality of the services, and the effects of their advice of the services provided. But we have also the farmers and other potential users within the ACIS who have the stake to have tools to assess the performances and the quality of the services which are provided by the advisory services. The third potential users are the policymakers. Given the positioning of the advisory services within the CAP, the major integration within the ACIS, which is required by the CAP, there's a need for policymakers to have tools to assess the performances, the effectiveness. And then we will talk about quality criteria of the advisory services. So we need, of course, a framework which is significant for the purposes of the policymakers, for the objectives that policymakers pose to the policy, to the interventions by which the use of the advisory services are strongly promoted, because they pay, they are the grantors of the advisory services, so they have stake to have specific assessment tools. And then we tried also to address another issue, the exhaustiveness of this framework in terms of evaluando. Well acknowledged that this is a really tricky point, because we need to evaluate the quality of the performances of the advisory services from one side, and we will say also what is meant by quality, and then also the effectiveness, the role, the influential role of advisory services in changing practices and supporting choices in farming systems at farm level, but also let's think also in transition, over transition pathways. So their influential role in intersecting this and be effective in promoting, supporting farmers and farming system in changing practices and so on, or just in this making decisions about farming practices. So a really complex evaluando, and we should have been exhaustive in terms of evaluando. So which are the challenges in assessing the advisory services? Well, some of these are the main challenges, I might say. The first strand of challenges is related to the context, the policy context, mostly the policy context of where advisory services act. This is about the complexity of the acquis, the numerous, the plural, which is about the plurality of actors, of farmers and other actors, other types of actors which operate within an acquis to engage in innovation processes. And so the complexity of interactions, institutions, actors that play a role in functioning, in making functioning the agricultural knowledge and innovation systems. The advisory services, the performance of advisory services needs to be assessed also against this specific concept, which is very complex. The complexity of their interactions within the acquis, of course. The plurality also of the services, because according to studies which are also very recent, I mean, we have ProAquis, we have I2Connect studies about the state of play of the acquis and of the advisory services, are certain that there's a wider and increasing wider plurality of services provided to farmers, but also to other type of clients, let's call them like this, within an acquis, and provided also by a plurality of typologies of actors. Advisory services are not nowadays are not just played by typical farm advisory services. There's a plurality of actors which are playing some types of services which are very close to the ones of the farm advisory services. The plurality also of farming systems across the countries. And this is very an issue, because when you are working to elaborate, to define an assessment framework, you should be very aware that this framework needs to be adaptable, replicable, but adaptable in different contexts. Even in European countries where we have really different farming systems, and somehow the advisory services needs to reflect, and the value of the performances of the advisory services needs to reflect the diversity of the farming systems which are on the ground. And then, of course, due to the fact that within the European countries, most of the budget of the advisory services comes from the PAC, from the CAP, from the Common Agricultural Policies, because they are paid by public policies, by the European policy, and they should better access to these funds. Of course, the common policy is a point of reference, but we should be very well aware that across Europe we have different types of intervention languages in programs. So the provision, the support, the promotion of the advisory services is in any case very different across the different programs which which support, put some financial resources for promoting the use of the advisory services. Other challenges are referred to the state of the advisory services. This is a refuse, but this is about the influential role or of the competencies, the background in achieving some performances in providing advisory services with a certain quality of the advisory services. The numerosity also of the advisory activities that they need to play to support farming systems and farmers. Then the numerosity of farmers and other potential users of the advisory services. This is challenging, of course, when defining a track to assess the performances and the quality of the advisory services. We must be aware that based on scientific literature, previous scientific literature, that the pathway of effects of advisory services is not rather linear on farms and on farming systems, because we have, and I will tell you later, we have some outputs, but results, outputs which could be somehow as linked, interlinked to the activities of a certain advisory service provider, but about the results, the impact, constructing the impact chain of results and impact due to the advisory services activities. This is really challenging, because at farm level and at farming system, we have a bulk of influential factors that intervene and influence somehow the effective pathways, impact pathways in farming systems. And then lastly, but not ultimately, but not lastly, the baseline data. I mean, we have not really in historical, let's say, an history of a series of data about the performances of the advisory services in European countries, because this was less approached by the Common Agricultural Policy and the framework on monitoring and evaluation. So at least they are not so indeed, they are not so deep into the advisory services and their playing at farm level. So from what we started, this is the methodology we used to tackle with this challenges and building up this evaluation framework, this assessment framework of the performances of the advisory services. But how we addressed the exhaustiveness of the framework. Well, we started building up around a bulk of literature, scientific literature, which was already in place, mostly at international level, because, as I said, we don't have really a story of evaluation in advisory services in across European countries. So we built up around a bulk of literature, very important literature, Birner et al., Regina Birner et al., 2009, and then also Ferdinando Landini and Guy Faure and so on, which are more focused on other international studies than on European types of advisory services, but they provide a very good, very influent framework, historical background framework. And based on this, we selected some quality criteria for advisory services for the assessment of the performances and the effectiveness on the ground of their intervention. And then and this was based on desk research. of course. And lately we went through, we addressed the context sensitiveness through a mix of methods, desk research to analyze the context of the advisory services in place in Europe, and the topics, for example, by also analyzing the topics of advisory services that were delivered under the Common Agricultural Policy during the last programming period, to understand well what was needed on the ground in terms of topics of advisory services, topics, but also methodologies, if there were not, and so on. And from the, of course, the CAP framework, the policy framework of the CAP was also a point of reference to define topics and methodologies which were needed to contextualize this assessment tool. And then also we based on a survey on advisory services and farmers, the identification of possible contextual factors which were influential in assessing performances and the effectiveness of their activities. Thirdly, the significance of the framework for the potential users of it was defined based on a series of focus groups with potential users, with farmers, with advisors, with policy makers, and we have in mind also to have a mix focus groups which will engage all together farmers, advisory services, and the policy makers, in view of comparing also their respective perspectives in assessing the advisory services. So the significance of the framework was based on questions relating to the expectations on quality criteria and the effect on the effectiveness of the activities provided by the advisory services. So it was based mainly on defining, together with these potential uses, values of quality standard criteria. I will say you later on which one. So the theoretical background, I was mentioning Birner et al. Here you can find this elaboration on our elaboration on the background of Birner et al., which is, I mean, for us, the basics of about understanding, let's say, the performances of and the quality of the advisory services. So Birner et al. Was really aware of the complexity and the comprehensiveness of this of a monitoring and and evaluation system, and so they elaborated this framework that provides an impact chain to comprehensively analyze advisory services by examining the overall environment, political, contextual environment of the advisory services, let's say the framing conditions that enable the advisory services to play on the ground, and the primary and secondary outcomes of the advisory services provision in terms of output. You see the column here. Sorry, I guess I can. The performance in terms of the performances of the advisory services in terms of output, results, and impact. So this is the entire chain which is very useful to assess, to setting up a framework for the assessment of the performances of the advisory services by establishing this causal relationships among the characteristics of the advisory services and its performance, organizational performance, the consequences, output, results indicators, and impact are somehow immediate consequences or mediated consequences, long-term consequences of the advisory services performing somehow. This was the so-called best fit approach, which adopts a systemic perspective in which the system, the overall system and the influential factors of the advisory services provision about performances and effectiveness are analyzed. Here you can see here the policy environment, the capacity of potential box B, the capacity of potential services provider and partners, the single capacities of the different types of the plurality of the advisory services providers. The conditions, the framing conditions about the production system and market access. So the typical, how it is characterized, the farming system and the market, here, the types of crops and so on. And then the community aspect, the land size, the distribution, the education levels, and so on. These are contextual influencer factors of advisory performing. And then we have also in box 2 the characteristic of the advisory providers, of course, and then in box 3 we have also the impact chain. We particularly focused on the quality of service provided, and this event is about the assessment, the framework about the quality of service provided. So how we continued, given that theoretical background? Well, here you can see what we've done. We started co-defining the evaluando together with the potential users. So the three of those farmers, advisory services, and policymakers, and we somehow mapped the two trajectories of the assessment of advisory performance. You can see at your left the effectiveness in terms of the impact chain. Let's say the effectiveness in terms of impact chain at farm level, at system level. So about which needs to track the impact about the output indicators, the result indicators, and the impact indicators. And here we asked for each of them what is significant to assess, in your opinion. So based on your expectations on the effects of the advisory services, what is significant to assess, and how do you evaluate? So which output indicators are relevant given a certain number of a certain list of tasks of activities of the advisory services? What are the possible relating result indicators, and what are the possible impacts that these activities can have? Well, this part of framework is not part of this event. I will tell you just that this part is relying on a previous study of Cristiano and Prietti in 2019, which was about the use of FDN, this pharma accountancy data network that we have in Europe and in each member state across Europe, and which is about the statistical collection of relevant farm data data which is about technical, environmental, and social aspect of farming practices, of farms. So this collection of data, which is collected at on annual basis, according to statistical procedures, and they are also relevant for the accountability to the European Commission about the performances of the common agricultural policy. So this part will be based on the FDN collection of data. The second part, and the quality of the performance, how we defined the framework for assessing the quality of the performances. Well, on this point, we defined the evaluando together with the advisors, mainly, firstly, together with the advisors, and secondly, with farmers and policymakers, by defining a set of quality criteria and sub-criteria which were relevant for the advisory services to define, to configuring the quality, the service quality, the quality of certain services, and so the overall performances. Here we followed a lot Landini, Ferdinando Landini, which work more on international level, and also some other studies on SERVQUAL, so-called SERVQUAL methodology. They developed, but also this criteria based on the research done by Guy Favre and others at the European level. And of course, this criteria, you can find also this criteria here somehow, relevance, effectiveness, efficiency, belong to Birner. So from the framework, the background, the theoretical framework, we extract somehow the list of possible criteria which could have set up, configurate what is a quality service for advisory services, to defining what is a performance and advisory services performance. And then we discussed together with these potential users this set of quality criteria. And this was very interesting, I must say, because this gave us the insight to define, to profiling, to configure the evaluando of our framework for the assessment. So the quality criteria were the relevance of services, the effectiveness, the responsiveness, so the promptness to answer to the demand for advisory services, reliability, so also very close to professionality, of the advisory services, the support to innovation and transition pathways within the ACIS, the capacity to tailor advisory methods and tools to the farmers, the information, the capacity to provide information and knowledge transfer, the diversity, the wider diversity of clients and types of firms which are served, the demand articulation, for example, how they can intermediate between farmers and practice and research. And also other type of skills which are more soft, normally called as soft skills, empathy, assurance, and other soft skills. The idea is that based on this quality criteria, there will be some periodic assessment done by the potential users, all the three of them. And here, how it works, this assessment, performance assessment. I give you just the sample of the criteria about relevance. Relevance, the sub-criteria is translated together with the advisors. It was decided to translate the criteria of relevance into the contents that are relevant for farmers and clients. So the advisory contents that are needed or the opportunities, the advisory contents somehow are needed, are driven by the needs or the opportunities of the farmers or other type of clients. So the use of mechanisms, the sub-criteria is the use of mechanisms to assess systematically the needs or identify opportunities for guided demand planning about the advisory services. The question was defined as to what extent do you put in use mechanism to assess needs or identify opportunities for your client. And according to our model, which is based on circle model, what we defined some standard values for each sub-criteria. So for each sub-criteria, we identify together with the advisory services, the farmers and the policymakers, which is the value that criteria has according to their perspective. And so we collected the standard values from them, and based on them, these standard values are compared to the actual score, which is assessed for each sub-criteria by the user. So let's make that the advisor is using this tool. So on these criteria about relevance, let's say that we have a standard value which is in a Likert scale from 1 to 5. So let's say that relevance has a standard value about 4, and the assessment, the actual score that the advisor have is about the balance score. Actual score, the balance of the actual scores of the 3 potential users. So the actual score provided by the advisor, the actual score provided by the farmer, and the actual score provided by the policymaker. So the actual overall performance is done by the summary of all actual scores, the balance summary of all balance actual scores against the standard value. Here you probably see it better. So, for example, this is the typical questionnaire for the assessment that we provided. And so about the relevance, the assessment criteria, the criterion is here. The first question, this criteria is just one question. So how frequently do you put in use surveying tools, procedures, and so on? The answer of the advisory, the provider of advisory services, of the farmer and of the policymaker is one of these answer in Likert scale, almost always, often, sometimes, seldom, never. And the score might be from 5 to, the correlated score is from 5 to 1. Then the SERVQUAL formula will give the assessment about this relevance. So to what extent this advisor is performing on relevance. Just one precision, one precision clarification. This is the question that we put to the advisor. Of course, we provided also 2 other questionnaires. One is for farmers and the other is for policymakers. These are, the mirrors of these, but of course the questions are posed in another sense. The point is that they have to achieve, to score the same questions of this questionnaire in view of summing the answers, the scores put by all by the advisors, the farmers and the policymakers all together, and to gather, calculate the final score, which we can attribute to the advisory service. I hope this was quite clear. We developed this assessment questionnaire, which is a tool, a very practical tool. We needed to produce a very practical tool, not time-consuming for the advisory service provider and so on. So the idea is that this questionnaire must be delivered through periodic assessments, so on systematic basis, by both the advisor, the farmer, and the policymaker. This questionnaire allows also, because of the type of questions, allows also to clearly identify the sub-criteria through the sub-criteria, identify possible gaps in competencies and skills of the advisors, and go to precision learning. So this is very important. The questionnaire is based, this methodology is based on the triangulation of values posed on the performances of the advisory services, because it's based on 3 types of questionnaires and an overall judgment about the quality performance of the advisor for each criteria and sub-criteria, and is based on robust methodologies, not just self-assessment by the advisor, but it's a triangulation of judgments done by the different types of users of this tool, but and this and the calculation, the formula is based on previous research and practices about the assessment of the advisors. So just to give you an example of what happened during the meetings, because this I didn't say that, but we carried out a number of focus groups, together with the advisory services, farmers, and policymakers. So these are the values, for example, given by the advisory services on the quality criteria, the relevance, and so on. You can see, for example, that the relevance is the one most valued for the advisory services, but then we have also the effectiveness of the advisory services and the responsiveness. These are very good criteria to, in this moment, to allow advisory services better interacting within the, better increasing competencies, skills to interact within the ACIS. And this is also a slide about the sub-criteria. I just want to say to you that highlight that the support to innovation processes is the most valuable here sub-criteria for advisory services. Of course, here you can see how much the policy is influencing, and the objectives of the policies are the CAP policy is influencing the perspective of the advisory services in valuing this sub-criteria. Water management, biodiversity, animal welfare, for example. These are in Italy one of the most typical challenges of the policies, and these are the most valued criteria. Some conclusions about the process of co-construction of this framework, assessment framework. First of all, that was a very impressive, I would say, cognitive and developmental pathway for the advisory services. I mean, they increased a lot in sensitiveness, but also in awareness and in strategic approach also, because meanwhile we were during the process of co-construction this assessment tool, they started, I mean, rejecting or being reluctant because of having an assessment, because they are not so used to be assessed in quality performances. They need also to be sure that this was not a control, but this was evaluation. I mean, so they started a sort of spiral of development in competencies and sensitiveness. So after the phase of rejection and reluctance, they started to be more aware about and consciousness about the opportunities to carry out some systematic assessment of their performances. And then they started also appreciating the tool and the issue of being assessed, of interacting also together with the farmers and the policymakers to being evaluated in their performances. And then started also, of course, this is a pathway of development in competencies which was not all the same for all the people involved in this group, but this was something that we recognize in some of them. Of course, this is a process which needs to last more. So they developed also a strategy development. I can use this for this and so on. They took also some actions organizing and started organizing possible the use of this assessment tool, and they started also thinking about how to uptake this assessment tool. One thing I forgot to tell you is that this process of co-construction of this assessment tool was conducted together with the team of these two projects, I2Connect and Ramones, specifically CREA team, which was in charge of responsible for developing this framework. But we asked also this CONAF, to which Lina Pecora belongs, CONAF, which is the National Association of Professional Advisory Services in Italy, to give us, to set up a group, a thematic working group of people. They are about 30 people, which constantly, systematically, at least one time for each month, we meet each other and we discussed about the development of this tool. So what I want to do now, because I'm really out of time, to present you some testimonials from people which participate, from advisors who participated during these meetings of the co-construction of the assessment tool, and then also ask one of our partners, which is an advisory services, to have some insights to us about the uptake of this tool. So please, I ask Valentina.
An innovative aspect for the advisor. Anticipating needs is very difficult because when the client does not give you an indication and you go into unfamiliar topics, you put yourself in question because there is a risk that new problems will arise for you. However, the support in getting the vision is very important for exploring the competence needs of the advisor. Otherwise, you are always one step behind. I am thinking, for example, about digital competencies. Many farmers do not express their needs because they are not aware of them, and therefore we would never think of having a training need in digital competencies. Instead, if we anticipate the need by looking at markets or other business models, we will be on a path to innovation. I often advise on innovation and transition processes. I give a lot of importance to this criterion, even though clearly once this type of advice has been given, the client moves on to colleagues specialized in the area of innovation. This criterion is also very important, and in this respect, I would say that sub-criterion 7.3 has a strong connection with sub-criterion 7.1, because when we give advice on environmental management, we almost always talk about regulation to be complied with, and our role is also to point out the regulation must be observed. In this criterion, I would include also a sub-criterion concerning animal welfare, which we deal with a lot, but also a sub-criterion concerning biocides to be used against parasites in animals is missing. And in this field, there is no sustainable use, there is no knowledge, and very often we also have to train veterinarians.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I stopped sharing my presentation, and I would like now to pick on the floor. I don't know if Laszlo is here, or maybe there's, yeah, I can see Laszlo. Hello, good morning, Laszlo. Thank you for being here. So I prepared some questions for Laszlo, because Laszlo is one of the partners of Ramon SPL project, and it's because of him actually that we started preparing this assessment tool and framework to assess the performances and effectiveness of the advisory services. And so to conclude on this presentation, I would like to ask Laszlo some questions about which brings us to the follow-up of this performance tool. So the first question is, why there's a need, in your opinion, for a tool for evaluating the performances of the advisory services, and what are, in your opinion, the main advantages of applying an assessment tool to your performances as advisors, of course?
Well, actually, I prepared with a short presentation. If it's not a problem.
Yeah, of course.
Hopefully, you can better understand. Hello, everyone.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, just briefly about our project. So this is called Ramon SPL. It means Rural Advisory Monitoring Evaluation System linked to precision learning. This item, this concept, precision learning, was mentioned already, Simona, during the presentation. And we are glad to be invited and be part of this meeting with our project, where we utilized, as the title says, tailored performance assessment tool for advisory services based on the methodology which has been already presented. I would say we haven't got yet opportunity to fully utilize the tool, but we are currently conducting our pilot phase in the project in several iterations, and of course we started with a simplified methodology, but we are going to reach a higher level of adapting to this methodology during next project steps, which will be until March next year. So here you can say some basic information about the project, and we are glad to have CREA on board, LRKC also, SECRA, Secretariat, having good experiences working with competencies and training of the advisors, and we have some other partners. We are conducting our pilot activities in Hungary, in North Macedonia, and Slovakia. And our main objective is to improve advisory services using monitoring evaluation system by different type of tools. As I said, we started with a simplified version of CREA currently presented tool, and our main aim is based on the result of evaluating this information to provide targeted, more personalized training for advisors based on knowledge gaps and competency gaps what we can measure by this tool. And in next step, we are also to develop quality certification scheme, which would use similar data monitoring data like the one for the training. More information is available on the website of the project. And well, we've been actively collaborating on a competency framework with CREA in the first step, and then under the second one, evaluation methodology, we led by CREA, we developed this output for the performance assessment tool. So as it was shown to you, this is the result, what we received, a questionnaire for advisory services. We used it in the first stage. That's why I'm also saying it's a simplified way, so no triangulation until now, but we are adding the policy and the farmer level very soon, used for advisory service providers. Some views of the document and the form, what was made part of the deliverable documents. So based on this report, we prepared localized version of the questionnaire for advisors. And we also, in the first part of the year, got it filled out by our advisors. Then analyze the results, and then we tried, based on the feedback information, to assign each advisor with specific learning modules which have been already created or in the process of development. We are planning to develop small or micro learning modules for targeted capacity building in the specific competence areas based on the result of the evaluation of the performance assessment tool until the end of the project. So we feel it will be also nice, if valuable byproduct, that we will have like 30 separate learning packages for advisory work, mainly for soft skills, but also targeting some specific agricultural technical skills as well. Based on advisor self-assessment regarding the importance and proficiency of some different areas, we looked at the bigger differences between importance and proficiency, and when there was more than 2 points difference, we identified it as an area with knowledge shortage, so suitable or recommended for targeted training in the specific topic. So we had 2 sections: technical, professional skills, and related to soft skills. And according to the same logic, we are setting up the learning modules. Just here a quick insight what type of soft skills and technical specific skills we are addressing. Also, mainly according to the first output, the Ramones competency framework. And then the last slide, e-learning system we are using as well when already creating a core English set of small modules corresponding to the knowledge gaps to develop, and also now we are translating to the national languages, and actually the learning phase has already started in Hungary, and from summer we will start the next iteration with better use of the tool from CREA. So thanks again for opportunity and to be here today, but also to use methodology and the tool from CREA. Thank you.
Thank you to you, Laszlo. Thank you very much indeed, because of your presentation, which somehow channeled our, made more clear how this framework will be put in use and through this project, Ramones PL project, and until the precision learning tool. I mean, some key elements of this presentation, which I would like to highlight in the last minutes of our event, is first of all, thank you to you, is first of all the multiple languages that we will use in this to apply this framework, because this will be applied through an internet tool, digital tool on internet, so everyone can enter through due to, of course, the registration to the portal. And there are different languages because, of course, this tool can be used all over EU and not EU contexts, also because in our project Ramones we have no EU countries, and it can be adapted. The formula, the values of standard values can be adapted according to the contextual situation and perspectives, expectations of stakeholders, of actors, and key actors of the ACIS. So thank you very much to everyone. I hope you enjoyed this event, and please, you will find all the material on GLocal, on the GLocal system, as well as our emails and some links to go and deep your knowledge about this tool as you wish. So thank you very much indeed for your participation. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.